The story begins far away from crowded cities, busy roads, and the noise of everyday human life, in the quiet deserts of northern Chile, where the sky is clearer than almost anywhere else on Earth. A group of scientists worked inside a radio observatory built to listen to the universe. They were used to long nights, strange signals, and natural space noise that came from stars, black holes, and distant galaxies. Most of the time, the signals they picked up were easy to explain. Maybe a dying star exploded, maybe a planet moved in front of its sun, maybe a cloud of dust drifted across space and sent out tiny waves of energy. But one night, something different happened. A soft, broken pattern appeared on their screens. It was faint, weaker than a whisper, and the computers almost ignored it completely. At first, the scientists thought it was just background noise, maybe static from space dust, or a reflection of Earth's own radio waves bouncing back. These things happened all the time, so no one got excited at first. But one young analyst decided to take a closer look. He zoomed in on the waveform and noticed something unusual. The pattern wasn't random. It repeated, and repetition, especially smooth and mathematical repetition, usually meant intelligence. He called to other researchers to check. They stared at the screen, confused and curious. The signal was too organized to be nature, but too weak to understand. They ran it through translation software, noise filters, and pattern recognition programs. Slowly, something became clear. The signal carried structure almost like a code, and when the world's best language programs were used on it, the results shocked everyone in the room. It looked like a message, not a message from Earth, not a message from satellites, not a message from any human technology. It was coming from space, from a point far beyond Earth's reach, and it was getting stronger, as if the sender was desperately trying to be heard. They immediately called their supervisor, who called his supervisor, who called government officials. Within hours, the observatory was locked down. No one was allowed to speak publicly. Phones were confiscated. Every scientist had to sign documents promising silence until the government understood what they were dealing with behind closed doors. Experts from around the world were quietly flown in: astrophysicists, linguists, cryptographers, mathematicians, military analysts, and communication specialists. Together, they reviewed the data again and again, trying to understand the strange patterns. The more they analyzed it, the more certain they became. The signal was artificial. Someone or something was trying to talk. The world outside remained unaware. People slept peacefully, watched TV, argued on the internet, went to school, went to work, and lived their normal lives. No one knew that something extraordinary was happening beneath their feet. In underground conference rooms where world leaders gathered to discuss the unthinkable, early analysis revealed something even more alarming. The source of the signal was a star system not too far from Earth, at least by cosmic standards. That alone would have been shocking. Humanity had never received anything like this before. But what terrified the scientists was not where the signal came from, but what it seemed to say. The long strings of data, once cleaned and sharpened, began forming shapes and rhythm, and in that rhythm, hidden deep inside the noise, was meaning. The meaning was simple, heartbreaking, and unmistakable. It was a plea for help. The scientists could barely believe it. They had joked for years about aliens sending friendly greetings or advanced knowledge or invitations for peace. But this message was nothing like that. There was no introduction, no calm explanation, no polite beginning. It sounded like something sent in desperation, like someone screaming across the universe, because they had no other choice. The message contained patterns that looked like maps, warnings, an emotional signal: fear, urgency, danger. It wasn't clear yet what the danger was, but the tone felt unmistakably distressed. Even though aliens might think very differently from humans, fear had a universal shape, and this message was soaked in fear. Governments around the world debated what to do. Some wanted to hide the signal completely, afraid of mass panic. Others believed the public had the right to know. Some argued that Earth was not ready. Humanity had wars, poverty, political problems, and no experience dealing with alien species. How could humans help anyone else if they could barely help themselves? But despite all the disagreements, one fact united every scientist working on the project. The message was real. It was not a mistake, not a glitch, not a natural phenomenon. Someone out there was calling to Earth. Someone knew Earth existed. Someone believed Earth could help. Days passed. Translators worked endlessly, comparing the alien patterns to every known language. The message didn't match anything humans had ever seen, but it did show intentional communication. Slowly, details emerged. The senders called themselves the Aru. They described themselves with symbols showing delicate bodies, gentle environments, soft light, and floating cities. They were clearly peaceful and technologically advanced in some ways, but fragile in others. They lived in a society that avoided violence, and now they were facing something far stronger than they were prepared for. Bits of the message described destructive invaders spreading from star to star. Entire colonies had already fallen. The Iruvani said they could not defend themselves. Their technology focused on science, art, and medicine, not war. They were dying, and for reasons Earth did not yet understand. They believed humans could help them survive. One line of the message repeated again and again, as if the Aravani wanted to make sure it could never be misunderstood. The line, once translated, stunned every person in the room. Deathworlders of Earth, please answer. You are our last hope. This phrase confused many world leaders at first. What did that even mean? Why would aliens use such a dramatic name for humans? A group of astrobiologists explained something that changed the entire atmosphere of the meeting. They said that Earth, compared to most planets in the galaxy, would be considered extremely dangerous. Earth had deadly predators, violent weather, diseases, earthquakes, volcanoes, poisonous animals, and a harsh environment that forced humans to evolve into strong, adaptable survivors. If the rest of the galaxy consisted mostly of gentle, stable worlds, then Earth truly would look like a death world and humans would look like rare, fierce creatures capable of surviving almost anything. Suddenly everything made sense. The Aravani were not calling Earth because it was friendly. They were calling Earth because it was dangerous in a way that might be strong enough to protect them. The message continued to spread fear within the hidden task force. If peaceful aliens were begging for help, that meant whatever was attacking them could eventually become a threat to Earth too. The idea of remaining silent or uninvolved seemed irresponsible, but sending a military response, or even communicating back, carried its own risks. What if responding made Earth a target? Still, humanity could not ignore the call. The emotional weight of the message touched even the most hardened officials. People who had spent their entire lives making cold decisions suddenly felt something warm and human inside them. Empathy. The idea of an entire species begging for help, crying out across empty space, asking strangers to save them. It was impossible to shake off. As the decoding continued, world governments secretly formed a multinational task force. Scientists from countries that normally disagreed on everything were now working side by side. The task force prepared communication devices strong enough to send a reply across space. Meanwhile, military strategists began whispering about what Earth should do if the attackers came here. Engineers discussed new ship designs. Space agencies that normally competed with each other suddenly shared every resource they had. Outside the secret meetings, subtle signs of unusual activity began to appear. Flights carrying unnamed passengers arrived at Chilean airports late at night. Satellite images showed large transports going to remote scientific facilities. Amateur astronomers noticed radio silence on frequencies normally used by observatories. Rumors started to spread online, but nothing concrete reached the public, at least, not yet. Back in the observatory compound, the scientists kept working day and night. They were exhausted, but the sense of urgency kept them going. They felt like first responders trying to help a victim on the other side of the universe. Every second wasted meant more lives lost. Every delayed translation could mean another Aruvani colony destroyed. One evening, after almost a week of non-stop work, the linguists managed to decode a new segment. It was short, simple, and filled with emotion. When they played the audio recreation, everyone in the room went silent. The message sounded shaky, trembling, and fast, as if the sender was terrified while speaking. Please, speak back. We do not have long. You who survive the death world, you who endure the impossible, help us. The room felt colder. For the first time, the scientists felt personally responsible. This was not an academic puzzle anymore. Real people, real beings were suffering somewhere beyond the stars. Earth had been contacted, not with peace, not with curiosity, not with warnings, but with a desperate cry for help, and somewhere deep inside every listener, a question began to form, one that would shape the future of the world. If Earth truly was a planet of survivors, then did humanity have a duty to rescue those who could not survive on their own? The signal kept repeating, the room kept listening, and slowly, the world that believed it was alone began to understand that it was not alone at all. The days following the discovery of the alien distress signal felt heavier than anything Earth had ever experienced before. Inside the secret underground rooms where scientists, military leaders, and government officials met, the atmosphere changed from shock to fear, and then to something even more complicated: responsibility. The signal was no longer just a strange pattern from space, it was a desperate voice begging Earth to respond. And now that humanity knew the truth, ignoring it felt impossible. The message from the Aravani kept repeating every few hours. Each time new fragments were decoded, the picture of their situation became clearer and far more heartbreaking. The Aravani were not just scared. They were losing planets. Their homes were being destroyed. Their people were being chased and hunted by a brutal enemy. The more scientists learned about them, the clearer it became that their species had never developed strong weapons. They lived in a peaceful world with gentle landscapes, soft climates, and almost no natural threats. For generations, they had created art, science, technology, but nothing for war. Violence was something they didn't fully understand. Humanity, on the other hand, had lived with violence since the beginning of time. Earth was full of predators, storms, diseases, and conflicts. Humans evolved to fight, to adapt, to survive. So when the Aravani called humans Deathworlders, it wasn't meant as an insult, it was an acknowledgement. To the Aruvani, Humans were legends, creatures shaped by a world that tried to kill them every day, and that made humans strong in a way the Aravani could never be. This idea began spreading through the secret teams. Some scientists felt proud, others uneasy. If aliens truly believed humans were the galaxy's strongest survivors, then the pressure on Earth had become enormous. Could they live up to that reputation? Did they even want to? Meetings grew longer. Arguments became louder. In one meeting, a senior government official slammed his hand on the table and said, "Why should Earth risk everything for aliens we've never met?" Another responded, "Because if we don't help them, who will? And if the invaders finish with them, what stops them from coming here next?" The room went silent after that. Meanwhile, translators continued working on the growing message. One section described the alien attackers in vague, terrified terms. The Charavani didn't even have a proper name for them. They used symbols, meaning burning shadows or the devouring force. The few surviving recordings they included showed explosions, screaming, and cities falling apart under strange weapons. The images were so violent that even seasoned military officers felt chills watching them. But the most haunting part of all was a small symbol repeated at the end of every section, a countdown. The scientists weren't sure what it represented at first. Was it a time limit? A distance measure? A number of surviving colonies? It took 2 more days before they realized the truth. The Aruvani were marking how many of their worlds were still alive, and the number kept dropping. Every time the signal repeated, the number decreased. It meant the invaders were moving too fast. This was the moment things shifted from academic debate to urgent action. The United Nations Security Council was called into a hidden emergency session. Representatives from every major country sat in the same room, surrounded by armed guards. The decoded message was played in full, including the trembling emotional audio. Many of the leaders sat speechless after hearing it. Some looked pale, others looked angry, not at the Aravani but at the universe for putting Earth in such a situation. The first question they debated was simple: should Earth respond? The answer wasn't simple at all. Some nations believed sending a response would be too dangerous. What if the invaders intercepted it? That could reveal Earth's location and make humanity a target before they were ready to defend themselves. Others argued that Earth was already visible to anyone with advanced technology. Hiding was impossible. A few leaders insisted that Earth must avoid conflict at all costs. "We can't fight a war across the stars," one of them said. "We struggle enough with the ones on our own planet." But others believed ignoring the Aruvani would be morally wrong. One representative from a smaller nation said something that moved the entire room. "If we pretend their message didn't reach us, their blood will be on our hands." After hours of arguing, someone suggested a compromise: send a reply, but hide Earth's exact position. This idea offered a middle ground. It wouldn't commit Earth to military action, but it would give the Aruvani hope, and it would buy time to learn more. While these political battles were happening behind closed doors, something unexpected began happening outside. Even though the operation was secret, strange clues started leaking to the public. Amateur radio listeners caught fragments of static they hadn't heard before. A mysterious hacking group posted rumors claiming governments were hiding an alien message. News channels started asking questions. A few scientists whispered to close friends, who whispered to others, until the online world exploded with theories. Some said aliens were watching Earth. Some said Earth had discovered life. Some said the world was ending. People didn't know the truth, but they sensed something huge was happening. Social media became flooded with arguments. Some wanted peace with aliens. Some wanted war. Some accused governments of lying, while others dismissed the rumors as fantasy. The world was becoming restless, and leaders knew they couldn't hide everything forever. Inside the secret task force, the teams worked harder than ever. Engineers were ordered to begin designing long-range communication systems that could send a strong, secure reply. Military analysts drafted early plans for what Earth would do if things escalated into conflict. Nobody said the word war, but everyone was thinking it. The scientists decoding the message finally reached the strongest part of the transmission, a direct request. The Aruvani described their attackers more clearly. The invaders were aggressive, territorial, and expanding with no signs of stopping. They believed strength was the only language worth speaking. They were not interested in peace. They conquered every planet they found, stripped it of resources, and moved on. The Aruvani had tried to communicate, but it only made the invaders attack faster. And then came the line that changed everything. "We call to the Deathworlders because you are the only ones strong enough to fight them. We ask not for conquest. We ask for survival." When translators read this aloud in a meeting, everyone went silent. There were no more jokes, no more casual comments. This was not just a message. It was a cry from a species staring at extinction, and they believed Earth was their last chance. The rising challenge grew even more intense when Earth received a second message unlike the first. This one had visual content. It showed an Aravani city under attack. Buildings of crystal and light falling apart like sand. Families running, bright energy beams cutting through towers. The recording ended abruptly, followed by a single desperate voice whispering, "Please, someone answer." The room full of scientists and leaders felt a chill run through them. Seeing the suffering with their own eyes was different from reading it. It made the danger feel real, immediate, personal. The world leaders reconvened. This time, the arguments were more emotional. One country refused to risk involvement, saying Earth's priority must always be Earth. Another country shouted back that humanity had a moral duty to protect life wherever it existed. A military commander suggested preparing a defensive plan that could protect Earth in case the invaders came this way. A scientist warned that by the time Earth finished preparing, the Aravani might be gone forever. Slowly, something began to shift. Not everyone agreed, but enough of them felt the same weight on their conscience. Humanity had spent thousands of years fighting each other, hurting each other, destroying each other. Maybe this was a chance to do something different, something better. But helping wouldn't be easy. Earth had never built ships capable of traveling to distant stars. Humans had never fought alien enemies. They didn't even know what weapons the invaders used. Every step carried risk. Every plan had holes. Every idea seemed half-finished. But the more they debated, the clearer one thing became. Doing nothing was no longer an option. As governments worked in secret, tension spread across Earth. People sensed the world was approaching a turning point, even if they didn't know what it was. Some felt excited, imagining humanity stepping onto the galactic stage. Others felt dread, terrified of dangers they couldn't see. Religious leaders spoke of new beginnings. Scientists whispered about the end of isolation. Conspiracy theorists claimed everything from alien alliances to upcoming attacks. And then, after days of arguments, fear, confusion, and responsibility, Earth made its first real decision. Not to fight, not to send armies, not to reveal everything but to answer. A reply signal was prepared. It was simple, calm, and careful. It said Earth had received the message. It said humanity understood their fear. It said help would be discussed. It said they were not alone. No promises were made, but no door was closed. The moment the message was sent, something changed in the hearts of everyone who worked on the project. For the first time, humanity had reached out to another species knowingly, intentionally, and with purpose. It wasn't a dream anymore. It wasn't a theory or a fantasy. It was real, but sending the message didn't solve everything. It only raised more questions, bigger ones, heavier ones. Could Earth protect the Aru? Should humanity risk its own safety for strangers? What would happen if the invaders learned about Earth? Would helping others cost humanity its own future? These questions grew louder every day. They spread from government halls to military bases, from scientific labs to quiet family homes. The world began to feel like it was holding its breath. Something enormous had entered human life, and no one could escape its presence. The rising challenge wasn't just about helping aliens. It was about deciding what kind of species humanity wanted to be. And as the countdown in the Aravani message continued to drop, the pressure on Earth grew with every passing minute. The reply from Earth traveled through the darkness of space, carried on radio waves that would take days to reach the Aravani system. When the message finally left the planet, a strange calm settled over the secret task force. After all the screaming debates, sleepless nights, and tense meetings, there was finally a moment of stillness. But this stillness wasn't peaceful. It was like the quiet that comes right before a storm hits, a quiet full of fear, uncertainty, and heavy expectations. People in the task force kept asking themselves the same question: what if the invaders hear us instead? Everyone tried to convince themselves that the signal was safe, encrypted, and masked carefully. The engineers had done everything they could to hide Earth's exact location, but space was big and unpredictable. No one knew how advanced the enemy really was. If they were strong enough to destroy several Aravani worlds, maybe they were strong enough to track signals across star systems. But even with these worries, life inside the underground facility continued. More scientists arrived, bringing new equipment. Linguists worked on decoding the remaining parts of the original message. Astrophysicists tried to create a rough map of the Aravani star cluster using clues hidden inside the signal. Every tiny detail mattered, because the truth was becoming clearer every hour. If Earth decided to help, they needed to understand the battlefield. The message Earth had sent didn't promise military action, but it did promise one thing: that humanity was listening, and listening had consequences. 3 days after Earth sent its reply, everything changed again. The Aravani finally answered. The new signal was stronger, clearer, and far more emotional than before. When the audio was played, the voice sounded relieved, almost trembling with hope. They said they had received Earth's reply. They said they were grateful. They said they believed this was the first sign that not all hope was lost. But then the message shifted. The voice grew darker. The background noises once calm became filled with distant explosions, alarms, and static. The Aravani speaker said their worlds were falling faster than expected. Their defenses were collapsing. Their enemy was adapting. They begged Earth to act quickly. "We do not ask you to fight our war. We ask you to help us survive it." This message shook every person in the room. Some people cried quietly. Others clenched their fists. A few looked away, unable to handle the desperation in the alien's voice. It didn't feel like a message between species anymore. It felt like a message from a drowning person to someone standing on the shore, begging to be pulled out. That same day, the countdown number dropped again. Only 3 Aravani worlds remained. The pressure on Earth skyrocketed. The United Nations held another emergency meeting, and this time the tone was different. The leaders were no longer wondering whether they should help. They were wondering how they possibly could. Scientists presented an idea, a hybrid ship, combining Earth engineering with the small fragments of Aravani technology that had come through the signal. Even though the Aravani hadn't sent full blueprints, they had included glimpses of their energy system, communication structure, and some transport designs. It wasn't enough to build a functioning starship, but it was enough to inspire engineers from NASA, ISA, ESA, Aereo, Roscosmos, HOTA, AXA, and every major space agency were brought together. They were asked to attempt the impossible, create an interstellar craft, fast enough to reach the Aravani before they were wiped out. Most of them thought it couldn't be done. Earth was decades away from that level of technology. But when they heard the Aravani message themselves, they didn't argue. They rolled up their sleeves and started planning. Humanity had never been more unified than in those days. Rival scientists worked side by side like brothers and sisters. Old political grudges dissolved in the face of something far bigger than any earthly disagreement. While engineers began designing the ship, military strategists were called in to study the enemy recordings. It was the first time in history Earth had seen a real alien attack. The way the invaders fought was nothing like human warfare. They moved with precision, using weapons that looked like shifting energy rather than physical ammunition. Their ships changed formation rapidly, like a living swarm. They weren't soldiers, they were predators, and they terrified everyone who watched the footage. One general said in a briefing, "This enemy doesn't negotiate. They don't warn, they only take." Another replied, "Then if we face them, we must hit harder than anything they expect." This was the moment when the phrase Deathworlders began to change meaning inside those underground rooms. At first, it had sounded strange, almost insulting, but now, with the enemy footage playing on screens, people started to understand. To the rest of the galaxy, humans were dangerous simply because they had learned to survive in a world full of danger, and now it seemed that humanity might have to use that reputation for something greater than itself. But everything escalated when something unimaginable happened. A new alert. It came from a deep space monitoring station. Orbiting the moon, their sensors had detected a small object entering the solar system. At first, the object was thought to be a meteor, but its speed wasn't right, its direction wasn't natural, and its movement changed slightly, as if it were adjusting its course. That could only mean one thing: it was controlled. Within minutes, the underground facility went into full lockdown. Military personnel sprinted through hallways. Sensors were rechecked again and again. When the path of the object was traced backward, the truth came crashing down. It wasn't coming from random space. It was coming from near the direction of the Aravani star cluster. Someone or something had followed the signals. A probe, a scout, watcher, or perhaps something worse. The small object kept moving deeper into the solar system. At first, officials thought it would fly past Earth, but then it changed direction again. Just slightly, but enough to confirm it wasn't a coincidence. It was headed toward Earth. Panic spread through the facility. Leaders shouted orders. Guards rushed to secure communication rooms. Scientists scrambled to understand what the probe was doing. Some feared it was transmitting data back to the invaders. Some thought it was trying to scan Earth. Others believed it was a weapon. No one had answers. The news reached world governments in minutes. Fighter jets were scrambled. Satellites were repositioned. Space agencies prepared emergency protocols they had never imagined using. People around the world still didn't know the truth, but they felt something was wrong. Social media filled with strange sightings in the sky, unexplained military movements, and sudden power outages in major cities. Inside the underground facility, everyone watched as the probe approached Earth's orbit. It was small, no bigger than a car, but its design was nothing like human technology. Its surface changed color like living skin, and it emitted a faint, eerie pulse that made Earth's sensors malfunction. Finally, Earth decided to act. A laser defense satellite was ordered to fire a warning shot. The laser beam streaked through space, missing the probe by a safe distance. The probe responded instantly. It released a burst of energy that scrambled the satellite completely, shutting it down in seconds. That was all the evidence Earth needed. This was not a peaceful visitor, it was a threat, and that changed everything. Earth's leaders no longer debated whether to get involved. The invaders had already noticed humanity's interest in the Aravani, and they didn't like it. Whether Earth remained silent or not, humanity was now part of the conflict. In the underground facility, tension reached a breaking point. The engineers sped up the ship project, ignoring sleep, pushing their limits. Military strategists created plans for possible space battles. Scientists studied the probe, trying to predict what would come next. But the real turning point came when the Aravani sent another message, this one short, fragmented, and full of static. Their voice was shaking more than ever. They said the invaders had destroyed another world. Only 2 remained. And then they said something that made every human listening feel a cold shiver run down their spine. "They know you answered us. They know you are coming. Be careful. Deathworld, beware." The recording ended abruptly. The probe in Earth's orbit finally powered down, but not before sending out one last pulse, directed deep into space. Everyone in the room feared the same thing. The invaders now knew Earth existed. The escalation had reached its peak. The conflict was no longer something happening far away in another star system. It had reached the edge of Earth's own sky. Humanity was out of time, and whether they wanted it or not, the war of another species had just become their own. The moment the alien probe went silent, the world realized something terrifying. The invaders now knew about Earth. They knew humanity had answered the Aravani. They knew humans were preparing to help. The quiet panic inside the underground facility turned into a storm of urgent decisions, rushing feet, raised voices, and sleepless eyes. No one felt safe anymore. It was no longer only about saving a distant species. It was about protecting Earth from a threat that had suddenly become real. The engineers who were building the hybrid starship worked non-stop. Some slept on the floor next to their workstations. Others didn't sleep at all. The ship design was a mix of human technology, tough metal, heavy engines, strong power systems, and the small pieces of Aravani knowledge hidden inside the original distress signal. The Ruvani had shared their gravitational glide mechanism, something humans had never imagined. Using it, the ship could travel far faster than any human spacecraft ever built. Even though the Aruvani instructions were incomplete, Earth's best scientists filled in the gaps with innovation, guesses, and genius. Inside the ship hangar, sparks flew as welding torches lit up the giant metallic frame. Heavy cranes lifted engine parts that weighed more than trucks. Technicians soldered circuits with trembling hands, knowing the fate of two worlds depended on their work. No one needed motivation. Everyone knew exactly what they were fighting for, even before the battle began. Meanwhile, military strategists prepared a unique team that would travel on the ship. They were not just soldiers. They were specialists, astronauts, engineers, scientists, medics, pilots, communication experts, and tactical commanders. Each person chosen understood they might never return, but not a single one backed out. This mission was bigger than fear. The Aravani sent another message, a much weaker one. Their voice trembled with exhaustion. They said another world had fallen. Only one Aruvani planet remained standing, and it was under siege. Explosions echoed faintly in the background of the recording. The message broke the hearts of everyone listening. There was no time left. The hybrid ship needed to launch immediately. Earth's leaders gathered one last time in the hidden briefing room. They looked at the glowing map where the Aravani star system blinked in danger red. They understood that sending the ship might provoke the enemy further, but not sending it meant letting an entire species die. Humanity had debated long enough. The moment for hesitation was gone. The ship, named Project Dawnstar, was finally complete. It stood tall and shining inside the launch chamber, its body curved like a spear designed for the sky. The strange energy core glowed softly, mixing Earth engineering with alien science. When the crew entered, they felt a heavy silence settle around them. Every footstep echoed like a promise. As the launch countdown began, Earth felt united in a way it hadn't for centuries. Even though the public did not know the full truth, they sensed the world was holding its breath. Something enormous was happening behind closed doors, something powerful enough to change the future of humanity forever. When the engines finally ignited, the ground shook like thunder. Flames burst from the launch platform. The air vibrated, and then, with a roar, Project Dawnstar climbed into the sky. People across the globe unknowingly looked upward, feeling something strange in their hearts, as if their planet had just taken its first step into a much bigger world. Once the ship left Earth's orbit, it activated the gravitational glide system. The stars outside stretched like glowing lines. The familiar darkness of space twisted into a tunnel of light. The crew had trained for this, but none of them were prepared for how strange, beautiful, and frightening the jump would feel. In a single moment, the ship vanished from Earth's sky and reappeared years' worth of distance away. The engine hummed softly, like a heartbeat guiding humanity through the unknown. The journey to the Aruvani world took far less time than any human scientist ever believed possible. As the ship traveled, the crew studied every recording, every map, and every warning the Aruvani had sent. They knew little about the enemy, but the little they did know was terrifying. The invaders had ships shaped like living blades, sharp and fast. They used energy bursts that melted buildings. Their swarms moved like coordinated beasts, not machines. When Dawnstar finally exited its glide near the Aravani homeworld, everyone on board stared at the screen in stunned silence. The planet below was beautiful glowing seas, golden clouds, floating structures, but it was burning. Fires stretched across continents. Enemy ships swarmed the atmosphere like black insects. The sky was filled with streaks of red and blue light from desperate Aruvani defenses. The crew felt a cold wave of realization. They were too late to save all the worlds, but maybe not too late to save this one. They activated communication. The Aruvani answered immediately. Their voice was filled with shock and relief. They said they had never believed the Deathworlders would actually come. Their final city was under attack. They begged the humans to help them hold the enemy back long enough to evacuate survivors. This was the moment humanity stepped into galactic history. The tactical commander of Dawnstar gave the order. The ship's weapons systems, a combination of experimental Earth technology and adapted Aruvani energy amplifiers, powered on. The ship charged into the battle. The first clash was brutal. Enemy ships detected Dawnstar immediately and swarmed toward it. Their weapons fired glowing energy bursts that shook the human ship violently. Alarms blared, red lights flashed across every corridor. But the Dawnstar was built stronger than anything the enemy had seen. It absorbed damage, stabilized itself, and retaliated. Human tactics were unpredictable by alien standards. The enemy ships fought in rigid formation, moving like a single animal. Humans, in contrast, fought with creativity, chaos, and boldness. Dawnstar weaved between enemy lines, fired at angles the aliens didn't expect, and used sudden bursts of acceleration that confused their targeting systems for the first time in the battle. The invaders hesitated. They had never seen a ship fight like this. They had never seen Deathworlders fight at all, and now they understood why the Aruvani had placed their last hope in humans while Dawnstar distracted the enemy. Aruvani evacuation vessels launched from their burning city. These ships carried their last scientists, their last children, their last families. Dawnstar shielded them, redirecting enemy fire and destroying attackers approaching from behind. The enemy's confusion quickly turned to anger. They sent larger warships into the fight, massive spiked vessels with powerful cannons. Dawnstar shook under the force of their weapons, but the human crew refused to fall back. They pushed forward, aiming at weak points identified by Aruvani intelligence. At one moment, an enemy warship fired a massive blast, hitting Dawnstar directly. The floor shook violently. Sparks exploded from panels. Crew members were thrown to the ground. For a terrifying second, the ship's core flickered, but the engineers inside worked like lightning, stabilizing the system and rerouting energy. Dawnstar survived. Human stubbornness had become a weapon. As more Aruvani ships escaped, Dawnstar launched its boldest move yet. The crew recognized the enemy command ship, a towering vessel that controlled the entire swarm. Instead of retreating, Dawnstar charged toward it at full speed. The enemy didn't expect such an insane, reckless strategy. The human ship unleashed every weapon it had. Explosions rippled across the enemy flagship. The swarm broke apart, confused and leaderless. Dawnstar took heavy damage, but it did not stop. It rammed through the enemy's outer hull, delivering a final blast inside the ship's core. The enemy flagship erupted in a blinding explosion. The shockwave tore through the battlefield. The remaining enemy ships, now without direction, scattered into the darkness. DAWNSTA floated silently, damaged but alive. Fires burned in some corridors. Systems flickered. The crew was exhausted, bruised, and shaken. But they had done what no one thought possible. They had defeated the enemy long enough for the Aruvani to escape. The Aruvani voice returned on the speakers. It was trembling not with fear, but with emotion. They thanked humanity with a kind of gratitude that no language could truly express. They said humanity had saved more than lives, they had saved hope. On the bridge of Dawnstar, the crew looked out at the peaceful parts of the sky, still glowing with distant stars. Their ship was damaged. They didn't know if the enemy would return, but in that moment they felt something stronger than fear. Purpose. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy not as conquerors, not as invaders, but as protectors. The Aruvani survivors followed Dawnstar into deep space, heading toward a hidden sanctuary planet where they could rebuild. The crew escorted them, scanning for threats and staying alert. The battle had ended, but the mission was not finished. As Dawnstar guided the Aruvani convoy through the darkness, the crew felt a powerful truth settle in their hearts. They had changed the fate of an entire species, and in doing so, humanity had changed its own fate forever. The battle was over, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the noise of war. The Dawnstar drifted through space, its engine still warm from the fight. Some of its metal plates were bent, its lights flickered from time to time, and a few corridors had scorch marks where sparks had flown. But the ship was alive, and so were the people inside it. The Aruvani convoy floated nearby, their ships gliding like glowing silverbirds. They were damaged too. Some leaned slightly to one side from impact. Others had dark burned scars along their hulls. Yet all of them were moving, still breathing in their own way. Survivors, thousands of them, waited inside those ships, whispering prayers, hugging families, or sitting in silence trying to understand what had just happened. Inside the Dawnstar, the crew slowly recovered. People who had been running on adrenaline for hours finally sat down. Pilots removed their helmets and let out long breaths. Engineers wiped sweat from their brows and leaned against walls, their tired eyes still watching systems carefully. Medics checked wounds and patched cuts. The silence was filled with relief and exhaustion. The humans knew they had done something extraordinary, but none of them felt like heroes in that moment. They felt tired, small, and humbled by the sight of a civilization that had nearly been erased. Many of them kept thinking of the Aravani worlds that had already fallen. They had arrived too late to save them. The guilt hung like a quiet shadow. But whenever that feeling grew heavy, someone would look out the windows and see the surviving Aravani ships glowing like stars, and they would remember that their efforts had saved a piece of this ancient species. Not everything was lost. Not yet. The Aravani leader sent a message requesting to speak with the humans again. The Dawnstar crew gathered in the communication room as the holographic image appeared. This time, the Aravani leader's face looked older, as if years had passed in just a few hours. Their skin shimmered softly, and their large eyes held deep emotion. They spoke slowly, choosing their words with care. They thanked humanity not only for saving lives, but for giving them something they had lost long ago. The Aruvani said they had always viewed humans as dangerous because of their Deathworld origins, creatures shaped by a violent planet. But now they saw that the same strength which had once frightened the galaxy could also protect it. The humans listened in silence, many unable to find words. They had never imagined that their species, often divided, confused, and flawed back on Earth, would one day become a symbol of hope to an alien race. The Aravani explained that the survivors were heading toward an old sanctuary planet, a world hidden behind a drifting nebula. It had been abandoned centuries ago, but it was safe, untouched by war. They invited the humans to escort them on the journey, and the Dawnstar crew accepted without hesitation. Days passed as the convoy traveled through quiet space. During this time, something incredible began to happen. Humans and Aravani started communicating regularly. At first, the talks were simple. The Aravani asked about Earth, its oceans, its storms, its forests, its strange creatures. Humans asked about Aruvani culture, their art, their old cities floating above mountains, their songs that sounded like soft waves of wind. Then the conversations grew deeper. Aruvani scientists studied the humans with fascination. They were amazed by human adaptability, creativity, and emotional strength. They couldn't believe that a species so young, compared to ancient civilizations, had invented so many things on their own, from electricity to spacecraft, while fighting the harsh conditions of their wild planet. In return, humans were amazed by the Aravani's peaceful nature and advanced understanding of energy. They learned that the Aravani had been explorers for thousands of years, building beautiful worlds, creating knowledge, and avoiding war whenever possible. They were a civilization of artists and thinkers, not warriors. It made the horror of what happened to them feel even heavier. A gentle civilization had been attacked by something barbaric and merciless. Humans understood that too well. They had seen similar things in their own history, even if not on such a cosmic scale. As the days passed, bonds formed. Human engineers worked side by side with Aravani technicians, repairing damage on both sides. Medics shared knowledge about healing. Pilots taught each other maneuvers. Even simple jokes were exchanged, though they sometimes needed explanation. The two species were still different, but every hour brought them closer. When the convoy finally reached the sanctuary planet, everyone held their breath. The planet was a beautiful blue-green sphere hidden behind a maze of glowing nebula clouds. Its atmosphere shimmered with soft light. The surface below showed wide rivers, forests, and wide empty plains ready to be rebuilt. The Aravani ships descended slowly, almost reverently. For many of them, this was the first time they had seen a safe world since the war began. As the first ship touched down, the Aravani people cried soft, glowing tears that fell like small beads of light. Some fell to their knees, embracing the ground. The Dawnstar landed nearby. Humans stepped out into the soft air of the sanctuary world. The ground felt fresh, untouched by human hands, almost sacred. The sky above looked like it had been painted with shades of blue and silver. A warm breeze passed over them, carrying the scent of alien plants. Calm and sweet, the Aravani approached the humans in small groups. Some thanked them with quiet words. Others bowed deeply. A few simply hugged the humans, surprising everyone. The Dawnstar crew felt overwhelmed. They had never been greeted with such raw gratitude. While the Aravani began setting up their temporary shelters and scanning the land, the humans joined them, helping carry supplies, lifting equipment, and offering tools. They weren't ordered to help, they simply wanted to. Later that night, when the twin moons of the sanctuary planet rose, the Dawnstar crew gathered outside, looking up at the sky. The stars were unfamiliar, but they felt peaceful. Many of the humans found themselves thinking about Earth. Their planet was far away, spinning quietly in its own corner of the galaxy, unaware of the role it had just played in saving another species. Some crew members wondered if humans were ready for what was coming next. The galaxy would not stay quiet. The invaders might return. Other species might appear. Humanity would not be hidden anymore. But even with all these worries, a sense of pride filled their hearts. They had shown the galaxy who they truly were, not monsters from a depth, but protectors capable of courage, compassion, and sacrifice. Before the Dawnstar prepared to leave, the Aruvani leader requested one final meeting. They stood before the human crew and thanked them again. Then they offered something unexpected. They wanted to form a lasting alliance with Earth. They said the galaxy was large and full of dangers. No single species could survive alone forever. But together, especially together with humans, there was a chance to build something strong, an alliance based on trust, courage, and hope. The Dawnstar crew exchanged surprised looks. None of them had expected this. They were just a mission team, not diplomats. But they knew the decision wasn't really theirs. It would be up to Earth's leaders. Still, they promised the Aravani that they would deliver the message faithfully. Before leaving, the humans gifted the Aravani a small Earth-made sculpture, an object shaped like a star rising from waves. It was simple but meaningful. The Aravani accepted it with gentle hands and said they would keep it as a symbol of friendship. The Dawnstar took off the next morning. The Aravani lined up outside their settlements, watching the human ship rise into the sky. Many raised their hands in farewell. Some sent soft glowing streams of light into the air as a blessing. As the ship climbed into space again, the crew felt both sadness and accomplishment. They had grown close to the Aravani. Leaving them behind felt like saying goodbye to family, but they also felt eager to return home, to tell Earth what had happened, and to prepare humanity for its new place among the stars. When the Dawnstar entered the gravitational glide and stars stretched around them, the crew sat quietly at their stations. They were bruised, tired, and changed in ways they couldn't explain, but their eyes held determination. They had started their mission answering a distress call from a distant world. Now they were returning with a new truth. Humanity was no longer alone, and the galaxy was watching. They didn't know how Earth would react with fear, pride, or disbelief. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty. From the moment humans stepped into the stars to defend the Aravani, the universe had changed forever. And wherever humanity traveled next, they would carry the same fire that saved a dying species, a fire born from a world that raised survivors, fighters, dreamers, and protectors. The Dawnstar moved deeper into space, heading home, leaving behind the sanctuary planet glowing softly under its twin moons. And in that quiet moment, both humans and Aravani shared the same silent promise. This was only the beginning.